Welcome back to another episode of Till the Wheels Fall Off. I am Matt.
I'm Paige.
Today we are joined by Amber Hollingsworth. You might know her from the YouTube channel Put the Shovel Down, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Just stick around. You are not going to want to miss this episode. Check out our website, www.twfo.com, to find out everything that you'd ever want to know about what we do, who we are, our story, and everything else. You can also find merch on our website. We've got a newsletter and blog that goes out every Monday. It's totally free. You can get access to our free Facebook community over there as well. We've got over 3,000 other wheelies that are processing things, just validating each other, being there for each other, just supporting each other so you don't feel so alone. It's an amazing space where you can just say stuff out loud. You can post anonymously as well, so you don't have to let people know who you are. If you're not comfortable talking about it, that's completely fine with us. We've also got a course called Independently Strong. We built it with the licensed professional counselor, Dr. Christopher Taylor, to help you get your life back. If you don't know what Independently Strong is, we use a process we call the VEER, VEER, to change direction. You know the word, right? But for us, it's validate. We will validate you. We will allow you a space to express some of your anger and frustration and resentment. It's okay to feel that way. Then we're going to educate you on addiction, on trauma bonds, on boundaries, on all of the above, everything you've ever wondered about when it comes to holding space for yourself in a relationship like this. Then we're going to empower you. We're going to help you develop self-care routines. We're going to help you develop self-awareness. We're going to help you identify triggers and set healthy boundaries. And then we're going to help you and show you what recovery looks like, making life-changing differences in your life, decisions based on your values, no longer fear. And it's not for people who are just trying to leave a relationship or people who are just trying to stay. Our goal is to empower spouses and partners of people with substance use disorders to make decisions from a place of clarity and not fear. We are an alternative to traditional programs like Al-Anon. We're a little bit different than what they do. It's rooted in reality, and it's going to help you make decisions from confidence. You can get 75% off the course going to our website, independentlystrong.com or twfo.com. Just enter the code Wheelies75 at checkout. Again, that is Wheelies75 at checkout. And lastly, thank you to our sponsor today, Soberlink. Soberlink has been an amazing partner of the show. If you don't know what Soberlink is, it is an amazing breathalyzer, but it's just so much more than that. You can go get cheap breathalyzers at Walgreens or Walmart, and they may do the trick, maybe. But when it comes to something like this, when it comes to reestablishing trust within a relationship, when it comes to possibly legal consequences, when it comes to a custody agreement, you want to make sure the information you're getting is top tier. Soberlink is the gold standard of breathalyzers, and it's a really great tool. It can be used one of a couple ways. I think one is if you're trying to rebuild trust within a relationship, it's going to allow you to do that. You can schedule tests. They've got a 24/7 team on standby to verify everything that comes to the other side. And it notifies your contacts to let them know what's going on. Did they blow clean or not? You can have discussions around this. If it does anything at all, I think for spouses and partners, which is the space that we're caring about, it's going to allow you to rebuild trust, because for so long you've suspected it, but you weren't sure. Maybe you've been lied to about it. You're going to get the information. You're going to know that feeling equals that result from now on moving forward. And if you're someone like me who's had trouble with substance use in the past, it's a really great way to show people that you're walking the walk, that you say what you mean. You mean what you say, I should say. It's going to put that information out there so everyone knows. And then if you're in a custody arrangement, a battle of any kind, I don't think that Paige and I would do it any differently than to have this. It's court admissible in all 50 states and in Canada, and is trusted by over 200,000 clients. It is considered the gold standard in court. Soberlink has been incredibly generous. They're giving our listeners $50 off a device. If you go to soberlink.com/wheels, you can sign up and get one there. Again, it's soberlink.com/wheels. And does that do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I tried to get that all done in one breath.
You did great. Like under 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my God, Amber. So one time I did this and it was like 12 minutes I spent. Like brevity is not a skill that
you sound
I possess.
profesh, like a radio guy for real.
Right?
I'm not.
Like he's got it down. That's why I let him do it, because I don't.
Okay. So today we are joined by Amber Hollingsworth. Amber Hollingsworth, if you are unfamiliar, and if you're unfamiliar, I want to know how, because she is like the OG in this space. Amber is a licensed professional counselor and a master addiction counselor. And she's also the founder and owner of the Hope for Families Recovery Center. I got that right? Hope for Families Recovery Center?
That's
in
right.
South Carolina. It's a recovery facility that specializes in helping individuals and families heal and rebuild their lives after addiction. And in addition to doing her work for the center, she's also the star of a highly successful YouTube channel called Put the Shovel Down, which is where you probably know her. Amber, I don't know if you know it, but you're mentioned in Facebook groups all over the world. Like your content has helped so many people. And I think it's just because you're just so engaging and straightforward, and you distill this stuff down into its simplest form so it's easy to understand for anybody. And I think it's taking complex concepts, making them easy to digest and metabolize. And I think that's what great teachers do, who really know what they're talking about. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today to talk about what you do, your thesis about all of this stuff and some of the things that you offer, and just have a fun discussion back and forth about recovery, families, spouses, addiction, all the above.
I love it. Let's do it. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I think I just want listeners to know that we are dealing with an expert in every sense of the word. I mean, you've studied this stuff. You've worked in it. You've lived in it. You have watched people for how long now have you been working with the Hope for Families Center?
Well, I started Hope for Families. It's a private practice. I have myself and a small team. And right after my son was born, so it was around 2012. But before that, I was worked in like a facility for like 10 years.
Okay.
Where we did detox, mental health, severe mental health. I mean, runs the gamut. All of it.
Yeah, you were tenured in this deal. So let's get straight into it. What is the most misunderstood role I think that people perceive that a spouse plays in the recovery journey?
I feel like the most misunderstood thing is that you get told all the time that you're powerless and that there's nothing you can do about it. And basically, I feel like spouses especially just get told like, well, they're just going to have to hit bottom. You're just going to have to back up. Maybe they'll figure it out. Some people do, not most of them. And hey, I don't know. And so you're like, what? This is my whole life. This is my children's life. Like, you want me to just leave it to chance? And there, I say you can't control it, but you have a lot of influence over it, a ton of influence. And so I feel like my mission is to teach people to use the influence that they have.
And when it comes to influence, I know that you are an advocate and a teacher of the craft method, right?
Right. I wouldn't say that I'm like what do they call it? Like, I don't do it completely all the way. It's the closest method to what I do. Is if you wanted to find like a method that's like in a book somewhere, it would be the closest. Yeah.
Okay. So
their philosophy lines up with ours really well.
So spouses are not as helpless as they may think, which has probably perked a lot of people's ears up just hearing that alone. Like, oh my God, you're saying that there's possibly something I can do. And so kind of walk me through that at a high level. What do you mean by that?
Over my career of dealing with people who have addictions, the people that come see me don't want to come see me. People get tricked into going to my office. For my first bunch of years in this field, like I had to do addicted teenagers. Okay.
Okay.
And I say, once you do that, you can do anything. Okay. Because they definitely didn't want to be there.
Right.
And so I've had to really figure out how to deal with people in denial, get people to trust me, engage people who didn't want to talk to me at all. And so I feel like that's where my skill set comes from is how do you do that? And if I can do that talking to somebody once a week, and I can teach a family to do that, not that the family or the spouse is the therapist, but if I can teach those tips and tricks on how to get those walls down, how to get someone to move past denial, you're with them all the time. So I always say, you have way more influence than I have. I can't do anything. I have an hour a week to talk to them, and that's it. And so I just think it's just so much more effective when the families can help set the stage for the person. Maybe I'm not saying that, it's like you're a replacement for treatment, but I can teach you how to get your loved one to go to treatment, right? Without threatening, without ultimatum, without all of that, really hard stuff that puts us in a tough position that we don't really want to do. So I feel like the people that we see in our office, the chances of them getting long-term recovery are a lot more connected to whether or not the family gets it than whether or not they get it.
Really?
Right. You can send me someone who's in denial and who doesn't get it, but as long as their family gets it and I'm working with them, they still have really good chances. sometimes I'll get people that call me whose families don't get it all. They're not involved at all. And even though that person called me and said, hey, I really want to do this, they're totally motivated, action stage of change, their chances are still not as good, like statistically, because there could be days when that person doesn't want to. There are days where you're stronger, days where you're not, and they don't have this other thing over here, this other safety net, this other support to hold them solid on the hard days. And so I think the family has just so much more influence than they realize.
They do. And I mean, our course is actually, it's based on the environment, social learning theory, and that how much the environment can play into decisions that you'll make as a person,
right?
For better or for worse. Like Dr. Taylor, the clinical architect of our course, used it, and he completely remodeled the way that drug courts work here in the state of Texas using this very thing. And so, talk to me a bit about how the environment can influence decisions one way or the other.
I think so often when it comes to addiction, the family, it's not like they're not trying to help. I mean, they're doing everything they can think of, right? They've begged, yelled, screamed, and bartered, everything, It's not that they're not trying. It's just that they don't know oftentimes that what they're doing is actually keeping a person, it's not that they're causing addiction, but they can keep a person in denial. Because what happens is the person with the addiction gets so caught up in defending themselves and defending their addiction because they feel like they're under attack all the time. They feel like they're being judged or pushed to do something they don't want to do, that it actually blocks them from being able to see the real issue. All they'll focus on is the family. And when it comes to spouses, it's the spouse. Usually the wife, could be the husband. Yeah. And the reason I know this is because having dealt with people who have addictions for years and years and years, it's all I can get them to talk to me about. Like, I've never had someone come in and not tell me it was their wife's fault. I've never, I guess I have, but very rare. And I think they just knew that wasn't the right thing to say. I don't even think they meant it, So once you can get them to move past that, to focusing on the wife or the resentment or the job, this external things, then they actually start to see the problem. But it's just they get so caught up in it. And every time you put someone in a position to say why they don't want to quit or why they don't have a problem, it's reinforcing it in their mind. So you never want to have a conversation or say something to somebody that's going to get them to defend that other side of it to you. So it's about teaching people how to get those walls down so that you have trust and credibility. You move out of the way so they can see the problem, and then you build trust and credibility. I call it like a credit report, like your financial credit report. And we have an online course, and we teach families literally how to measure their credit score, how to build points, how to subtract points when certain things happen. Then your loved one who's addicted actually cares what you have to say, right? It's two things. When they feel like you get them, like you really get them, you understand them. And that takes a lot of reflective listening and understanding their point of view. And they feel safe that you're not going to force them. Then they actually are very open to what you have to say and to your suggestions. So it's about raising your credit score with this loved one, backing out of the way of them seeing you as the problem, get out of the bad guy role. Now we have a formula that gets someone to start to let the walls down. It's like you have to make someone feel safe enough to face this scary reality.
Absolutely.
Because denial is a defense mechanism because they can't tolerate the idea of something, so they can't acknowledge it to themselves. If you make that reality seem scarier and scarier and scarier, it doesn't make them more likely to face it, right? So we have to make it a reality that seems manageable, that it can be done, that it's not that awful, that, the hole is not too big, we can get out of this. And then people are a lot more willing to consider that.
What are things that you typically see spouses or partners do to lose credit, to bring that credit score down? Where do they get it wrong?
Well, they come at it too directly is the overall general thing. And that comes in lots of forms, yelling, telling this person, you're screwing up our life, you're being a bad father, you're being a bad mother, I can't believe you're doing this. And they're sort of coming at this person in a critical standpoint, which again puts that person in a position to defend where they're coming from, right? And everybody has all these defense mechanisms. You know, they're going to tell you it's not that bad. It's not like I'm like those people in those meetings. It's not like I'm like your brother, you know, and they're going to start telling you how it's not that bad. And that's what I mean when I say you don't want to put a person in a position to defend that to you, because it reinforces their own thinking. They're convincing themselves every time they say it.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's like they reinforce the idea in their mind whenever you allow them to argue about that point, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So how can you build credit then? So if let's just say someone's got a problem, and for the record, like I know that I put people through hell, and I don't blame them for saying those types of things. I think what you're presenting here is just all that stuff's true, right? You have been maybe a bad father. You've been a bad husband. You've
Totally
ruined
valid.
the finances. So then how do you communicate that without losing your ever living, you know what?
Well, you hold your ever living you know what inside. And that's hard. One of the things I like about y'all's channel is you guys really encourage the family a lot better than I do to express some of that. And I feel like, man, that's just so much more fair, because I feel like a bad guy for telling them not to. Here's the thing, though. Once you stop doing that and you start treating the person differently, they start treating you differently. Even if the addiction doesn't stop immediately, they start responding to you differently. And then it's easier and easier and easier to come at this person with less hostility, right? And then we're actually sort of line up as a teammate with this person again to get them on the right path. So what you want to do is, if you know in their mind, what are their rationalizations, right? If their rationalization is, I'm not that bad, I'm not as bad as those people in the meetings. If their rationalization is like, what are you talking about? I can quit. I quit for 30 days 2 months ago. If their rationalization, whatever it is, it's probably got some truth in it, right? They're not the worst one out there. They did quit, you know, for a short period of time. Say that first. Just say it for them, instead of trying to, when they say it, then you try to start giving them evidence to the contrary. Okay, yeah, you quit for 30 days, but then you did this. And yeah, you are like those people in the meeting, and you start arguing back with them, right? And again, that's reinforcing in their mind. They're just, number one, it's reinforcing that they don't have an addiction problem. They have a spouse problem. That's what they think. That's what they all think.
Yeah.
And number two, when they're justifying their behaviors, it's reinforcing that in their mind. So it's like reinforcing all the wrong ideas. So if you just say, you know what, I know you're not as bad as my brother. And you know what, you're not as bad as half those people in that meeting. When you say that to someone, when you take their stance, they'll usually say, yeah, but it's not great. Yeah, but it could be better. Sometimes, it depends on how much credit you have. Sometimes they'll say it to you. If they're still kind of mad at you, they may not say it to you, but I promise you they'll think it.
They're thinking it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a reflex. It's a reflex to go against. So if you take their side, don't validate something that's not necessarily valid, right? It has to be honest, but there are points that have some weight to them. Acknowledge it. And then they don't feel as pressured or forced. And then they can, like, now that you've said what they're already thinking, now they can hear the next thing that's going to be said. If you can't say it and won't agree with it and don't say it, they literally cannot think anything else except that. It's like in their mind, it is screaming, you don't understand, you don't get it. That's all they're hearing.
Right.
And so you got to get around that defense mechanism.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. It's almost has shades of like How to Win Friends and Influence People, like Carnegie's book, or almost like the Socratic, like Socrates. Like it's almost like becoming a midwife to ideas, right? Like you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I used to say you could learn more about being a counselor from reading that book, the old school book, How to Win Friends, than you can from counselor school. Like if you could just do those basic little things, that'll get you really far.
Yeah, right. Like I think the best leaders in business and everything else, and some of the best like teachers are those that present the idea and make you think that it was your own. Right. That's what we do. It's like you're like a midwife to the ideas. You help them deliver the idea in some way. But I think what's tricky here, and what I want to ask you about, like you mentioned that like we do give spouses a space to talk about this stuff. Like with craft, like believe me, I've read the research on craft and it is amazing and it is right and it is scientifically proven. But what is the line between essentially giving a spouse a duty to be this midwife to the ideas and coinciding, I mean, or I guess at the same time having to take on and the abuse that's doled out from an addict? And like at what point do we draw the line? Does that make sense? Does that question even make sense?
No, there's definitely a line, and that line comes with safety, for sure, is a line that you don't cross, whether that's safety for yourself, your children, or someone else maybe that lives in the home with you. That's a no-go zone. And I tell people, I'm like, Everything I say goes out of the window when safety becomes an issue, right? So just trash it and deal with safety. And then there's also other things that I would consider abusive, not okay behaviors, other than just like the typical ones you think. Like if you're living with someone who has an addiction and they're constantly stealing from you, and you feel like you cannot even sleep without putting your wallet under your pillow at night or locking it up in your trunk because it's happened so many times. To me, that's abusive behavior, right?
Right. Or just draining the bank account, maybe a joint bank account or something like that. Financial abuse, a hidden credit card, something like that.
Right. You have to create some safety for yourself to be able to do these things, to be able to implement these methods, because otherwise your fight or flight, your alarms, I know they're going off enough already. They're really just going to be screaming at you so loud, it's not even really going to be feasible. So there are some definite safety lines that we don't cross no matter what. And then the other thing that I try to remind families of, as I say, addiction recovery is they're constantly resisting this craving to go chase the addiction, whatever that addiction is. Family recovery is you're constantly resisting the urge to say the thing. So they're withholding this, they're holding this in, and you're holding this in. And it's not that I say you can't say anything at all. It's just that instead of yell and scream and tell this person how terrible they are, just ask for what you need. Hey, it really helps me so much when you text me on your way home. It just helps me not get in my crazy wife space or whatever. Just ask for what you need versus trying to constantly bring up their old behaviors, constantly remind them of everything they've done wrong, constantly tell them how they're, messed up, because it just puts them in a defensive position, right? So you just want to, if it's not that you can't express your side at all, but when you do, you need to be very strategic about how you do it if you want to be heard. Because otherwise, just expressing a lot of anger, I know it feels to you like it's going to make you feel better, but it doesn't. Just like it feels to an addict that they're going to feel better after they go do that addict thing. And it doesn't. It just feels more of it, right? The more you scream, the more you yell, the more you threaten, the angrier you get, and then you feel guilty about it tomorrow. And then you feel resentful that you feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you feel better. It's an illusion.
Right. We try to help people not be aggressive in the way that they communicate things. It's more of like, I feel statements and this is what I'm dealing with and this is how I feel, instead of just like yelling or nagging or screaming or anything like that. Because with our experience, that's kind of how we were. I wasn't very aggressive towards him. I didn't yell at him. I wasn't like super mad at him. Yes, I was angry, but it was more, our communication style was, we validated each other. We actually we didn't yell at each other. It wasn't like super angry. We used our anger in a more productive way, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And so as we're talking about this, we always ask the question, like, what about spouses? And that's how the show really got started, because there are millions and millions of creators out there, or books, or, you name it, the information about someone's recovery. And there are amazing stories and they all deserve praise. Believe me, I've all have 12 years in April. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's really, really difficult. But it's rare to hear anything about a spouse's perspective. Generally, what's out there about spouses, it's like spouses have to do this. They should do this. They shouldn't do that. They need to say it like this, not like that. And they're given all these instructions, but no one's asking the spouse, like, how are you doing? Like when someone goes to treatment, everyone's concerned about the addict. Everything is about the addict. And so I'm curious, like within this space, are spouses who are working through this process, are they struggling in their own way, maybe silently? Do they have a therapist they're able to talk about this stuff with? Because it's a lot. It's a lot to ask someone to essentially be the midwife to this recovery in some ways. And it's a lot to take on. So I wonder, like, do you find it to be a really difficult thing for spouses to do? Also knowing at the same time they want to do this, right? They volunteer to do this. Like, they want it more than anything in the world. But what kind of toll does that take on them?
It's completely unfair.
Right.
There's nothing right about it. And I always say, on my channel, it's not about what's fair, it's about what works. And I say all the time, I'm not telling you that you should do this. I'm not telling you that I would do it. I'm just telling you, if you want to do it, this is how to do it.
Yeah.
And in my practice at Hope for Families, the whole model, how we were set up, the whole thing behind it is we give each person their own counselor, coach, whatever you want to call it. We call it lawyering. That's what we call it. So the spouse gets a lawyer, the addicted person gets a lawyer. I'm usually the one in the office that sees the person that has the addiction, right? So I know how they think, how they feel, how they're going to respond to everything you're saying and thinking. And that's why I teach you, here's what to do with them. But they also have their own advocate. And a lot of the things that get worked out actually get worked out behind the scenes with the lawyers mediating it out. And I'll say, listen, I'm going to need her to quit going through his wallet every day. And then they say, well, okay, well, I'm going to need him. And then we sort of like negotiate a lot of it behind the scenes. But that way each person feels like they have their advocate.
Right.
And they have someone that can hear their side and listen to them. But then the two counselors or coaches work together to sort of push in the same direction. Because we find that putting them in the same room in the beginning is just, well, first of all, it's just miserable for us. So that's probably honestly why we really do, honest to God. Because it's just awful. Yeah. It's like, I just can't do it. I'm just not that good. Either it's like an argument the whole time and everybody leaves feeling more angry, and then they're arguing about what got said in the therapy session, right? And it's like, why are we paying for this? It's worse. Or they play nice and they're not really saying anything. And it's like, well, this isn't doing anything. You know, we're just going in there playing nice because we don't want to argue in front of the person or whatever. And so that's why we developed it this way. It's like, you get a lawyer, they come just as much, it's sort of equally, and then we work on a lot behind the scenes. And then occasionally we will get into the room together, but it has to be, here's why we're getting in the room, here's what we're going to discuss. You know, we need to work a specific issue out or make a plan on something or whatever, then we will. And then you come in, you have your lawyer with you. So you feel safe. I got my person, right?
That's similar to our relationship building structure.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Like, kind of split them off. You split them off, and it's like, hang on a second.
One
like,
works with me, one works with him.
Like, we're not going to do this.
And then we'll discuss behind the scenes what we can do.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Right.
Get them to work together.
Yeah, we're not going to do this like right in front of each other. And there's also, like you mentioned, people act differently too. And like, so my best friend is a therapist, and he's like, we talked yesterday about he called it the Jane Goodall effect. You familiar with that one?
Isn't she the monkey lady?
Yes, researcher. But
yeah, I've not heard the effect.
So part of what came from her research is that she recognized that the primates acted differently when she was around. Yeah. And it's almost like under observation, we're going to behave differently. So even in therapy, you're going to get a really like grandiose, beautiful version of that person. But when you go home and there's no one watching or no mediator, things kind of get back to normal, right? It's like when you take a car to the shop, it's not doing the thing you brought it there for. Yeah. Like check engine lights off, and it's like, no, I swear it was on. Like, this thing was a mess yesterday, but now it's all acting right because the mechanic's there. Of course it would, right? Okay, right. So, and I think you acknowledge something beautiful there. Like, there's nothing fair about it, but it works. We can't deny it works, but it's not fair, and it's very difficult. Do you ever have to have a conversation with spouses that are just like, they're desperate for things to be better, but they're also just emotionally done? And what do you do in those types of situations?
I think that is really hard. And I do think that there's a point where you're emotionally done. And I give every, like, I'm like, when you're done, and you will know it. And don't ask me when you should kick them out. Don't ask me when you should cut them off, because you're going to know it. And there's nothing I could say that would stop you anyways. Or I couldn't convince you to keep them, right? When you know, you know. And I'm like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to back up, you don't have to keep that front row seat all the time. In fact, I encourage you to do that all the time anyways, because having that front row seat is exhausting. So get some distance from it and then come back to it little increments at a time, right? Yeah. Instead of wearing yourself out with it all day, every day.
Let's talk for a moment about accountability versus empathy, because I think that something that was present in our relationship was empathy. Whenever I was going through early recovery. But from my standpoint, I felt like there was some sort of like universal justice principle that dictated that I needed to show some accountability for this. Like, if I was going to receive empathy, then I needed to show accountability. And this wasn't ever said. It wasn't like we agreed on this. It wasn't ever in paper or anything.
It's like your values. Like, deep down, accountability was a value at your core.
I valued it. So when you're working with people in recovery, do you find it that they have a hard time taking accountability for a lot of the things that they've done?
When you say taking accountability, do you mean like in early recovery, like someone's watching over you, or are you saying more like acknowledging and admitting, like taking accountability, like saying, yes, I did this, you know, that kind of,
like acknowledging specifically the pain caused within the marriage and the relationship. Like I had this moment. I was in treatment and remember thinking to myself, like, holy hell, like I've derailed our lives and our marriage, and it's a lot to face. But I just said it out loud and I just acknowledged it. And it was an apology, but it was more like an acknowledgement. And I think that made her, it had to have validated you in some sense, right?
Right. Yeah. Like taking accountability for the lies that you told, the betrayal that was there, and things that you did behind, abandonment and stuff like that. Those type of accountabilities.
I guess I'm just curious on your take on that. Like, is there such a thing as too soon? Is there a certain line that you get to?
I do think that there's too soon. Not too soon if your heart is there and you're compelled to do it. Then you're ready. The person with the addiction, when it's on your heart to do it, that's when it's time to do it. But sometimes it's too early because the family wants it too early.
Right.
Somebody's sober for 6 days and the family's like, all right, now I'm gonna tell you about how it made me feel. I'm like, hold up, we're too fragile. So I do think that there is a time when someone is their head isn't even clear enough. They really don't get it yet. Number one, they're not ready to face it, and they don't really even realize it, because it's not like immediately that thinking clears. It takes a while after remove, and the further you are from it, the more you realize it. Like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Like, you just can't even believe it. But it takes a while to get to that point where you even realize that to that magnitude, and it'll heal you both for that to happen, because it gets off of your heart. It helps them to feel seen and heard. And mostly what the family wants to know is they want to know that how what you did affected them.
That's exactly
what kind of position it put them in, how that must have made them feel, all that. That's what they want to hear from you.
Yeah, exactly it. And that's what I hate about our content and me in general, is because I've put this out there that I did these things, and then anyone who listens thinks, well, why isn't he doing that yet? I'm like, some people just, they don't see it. They don't get it right off the bat, right? And that's something that we see a lot, like within our community, is people who are asking, when are they going to recognize what they've put me through, what I had to do, what we had to do to survive as a family? The nights I had to go to my mom's house because they were, throwing stuff across the house, or the money.
Sometimes it takes years for that to all unravel. Like even with our situation, you were able to apologize for surface level things within the first year.
Yeah.
But the deeper things, like that happened many years down the line. It was a process that would happen over and over again.
Yeah. So I guess, Amber, like what's your advice to give to spouses who haven't quite gotten that? Do you tell them to stick it out if you see progress? Do you tell them just to hold on? What can you say?
I say to look at behavior. Here's my thing on it. What are they doing? Because what they're doing matters more than what they say anyway. Because they could say whatever it means, nothing. But when you're seeing that behavior change, when you're seeing them make an effort to connect to you, to come closer to you, to fix things, that behavior is screaming it, right? And so some people, it honestly depends on how fragile someone's ego is, right?
Yeah.
And how safe they feel. Some people are just more vulnerable. Like how some people can just be more vulnerable and admit things. Like some people can just say sorry in general easier, right, than other people. And so a lot of it depends on temperament and personality, but it doesn't mean that they're not sorry, and it doesn't mean that they don't get it. It means they're too scared to say it. Right? And sometimes they're too scared to say it because they don't want to bring the conversation up, because literally all they're doing is just trying to like not hit the buttons. And they're like, oh my gosh, if I open that can of worms, like I might not can put it back in there. So it doesn't mean that they don't feel it or know it. Most of the time it means that they're too scared to talk about it. Yeah. And the reason I know that is because they usually are telling me that in session behind the scenes. Right. So they're not saying it to their spouse, they're saying it to me, and I'm like, if you said that to them, like, let's write that down because that was good. Let's go and say that. Or send it in a text if you're too scared, because that was good. They'll say it to me, but they're scared to say it to the family member.
Yeah, I find that to be really difficult for a lot of people in early recovery, is to acknowledge that pain. But it goes a long way. And anyone I've ever worked with, I've worked with a lot of people helping get sober. I always encourage that sooner than later. Like I push for it. Like it's going to be healing for you. It's healing for them. Like you have no idea how much this can mean to a spouse and partner. Because I just know in our relationship, like acknowledging that, it set us in fast forward, and it saved us a lot of trouble. Not having that resentment just kind of hanging in the air and whatnot. And resentment can be a killer. And that's kind of what we're talking about underneath it all right here at the basis of it, right? Like you've done something that you have not made right in my life, and therefore I resent you for it. And many people just feel detached from the relationship at that point. Like, I'm just not in love anymore. And I understand why, because this person has wronged you. They've done horrible things, and They've never made it right. When it comes to processing resentments, how do you go about that in your practice and with your method?
Well, first of all, when people's get their behavior in order, the resentments go down a whole lot. So, like I said, that behavior change means more than anything. I find that if you got to think, what is it I want from this person? And then you got to think strategically, how do I get it out of them? Not how do I feel or what do I want to say, but strategically, I need them to acknowledge whatever position, then just ask for it. You can say, it would really help me if I knew. You could just ask for it, right? There's just a lot of different ways to get someone to meet your needs better than being critical or yelling or screaming or nagging or reminding them of every bad thing that they ever did.
Yeah. It's almost like there's an unspoken criteria that has to be met if you're going to walk through this thing and figure it out. And you have to have enough patience left in you to kind of deal with this lonely period, with this lonely period where there may not be acknowledgement and you're going to be a little resentful. But you're right. It's about the behaviors. The behaviors are more important than anything. And we tell people this all the time. Paige has been screaming this into TikTok for the last 2 years. It's like, focus on the behavior, not even the substance, right? Because there are tons of people that use substances just fine. And there's no problem with adults using substance responsibly. I would argue that some of them probably have no business doing, but like alcohol, marijuana, people do this normally, right? Like people can do that and manage their lives just fine. It's not even the substance that you're really angry about. It's the behaviors that accompany everything. And it's not always...
And how they impact you.
Right.
It's like, how do they impact you?
Yeah, and that's a tough one for, I think, a lot of people to understand. But I think you get it. It's about the behaviors, regardless of what they're saying or what substance they're taking. What do the behaviors tell you? What do they show you? Like that's the ultimate determination of if someone's really doing the deal or not.
And you can have better conversations that way, even in active addiction, because it's surrounding the behaviors of what in your marriage and how it's impacting both of you, instead of focusing on the substance and getting someone to treatment and getting someone to do what what they probably don't want to do or don't think that they need to do. It's more of just opening that line of conversation about how is the behavior impacting me and us as a marriage.
Yeah, so
more receptive.
Just a bit of background. I was a closet addict. I was addicted to opioids, Adderall, alcohol, and
all the things.
Everything, basically.
Oh, all the things.
Oh yeah, I was like trash can junkie, and I hid it, and so she never knew it was going on. But what she did see were behaviors, and so what she did over time was wear me down with, you weren't present with us in the family today, like you were somewhere else, or like you were 4 hours late, like you were. Like that hurt me. Like I felt really abandoned by you when you did that. Like the way that you talked to me this morning, that hurt. Like she just let me know over and over and over and over that these behaviors weren't acceptable. And then I had to work it back and figure out, oh, I'm a drug addict. That's, kind of the basis of it.
I love that. That's so spot on. Cause that's what I say is like for example, let's say, like I told you before, a lot of people come see me because they got drug in by somebody.
Yeah.
I see a lot of husbands. And so the husband comes in and I'm like, why are you here? And they'll say, well, honestly, it's because my wife said she's going to leave me if I didn't come. I said, and the first thing I say to that, because some addiction counselors would say, oh, you don't even really want to be here. Maybe come back when you're ready. I don't say it. I say, well, I think that's awesome that you love your wife enough that you're willing to come do counseling, which you think is dumb. Talk to some lady you don't even know to make it better. I like you already. That's what I say, So I say that. And then I say, well, why are they making you come? What? Well, they think I have a drinking problem. Well, why do they think you have a drinking problem? I don't know. I go to work every day. I pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, it's usually not the drinking. What happens when you drink? Is it like your personality changes? Do you just fall asleep and then you're just like never awake? What happens? And then they're like, well, it's not like I hit her or anything. I'm just, I do kind of go in my own zone though. And so I'll ask the question, why is it that it bothers your wife that you do this? Because you're right, it's not the drinking, it's not the smoking, it's what is happening as a result of. And people that have addictions are actually a lot more open to hear you talking about that. If you say, and you gave a good example, if you say, hey, last night I feel like, you really disconnected. I thought we were going to have a date night or whatever, and I really missed out. It's a lot more effective than to say, oh, you got drunk again last night. So you don't connect that dot. You say the behavior because they're likely to see what you're saying there. Let them connect the dot, which is what Matt's saying. So you just set the first scenario and you let them connect it to the drug and alcohol problem. And they will. And they know that's why they don't remember that you had that conversation already. They know. So, but if you connect the dot for them, again, they're going to start defending it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about like what is recovery ultimately, it's a profound change in behaviors and philosophy on life, essentially.
Right.
And it's change behaviors moving forward. If you just focus on the substance and just say, stop using the substance, just quit using the substance, what you're going to get is a really irritable, angry, abusive person who's just not using a substance.
It's like taking a pacifier away from a baby.
Right. And so
He's not ready for that.
And so I think that what you're getting at also kind of it takes care of that, right? If we're focusing on behaviors, in order to change those behaviors, you're going to have to stop using that substance. They're not congruent. And that's what I came to terms with is like, I cannot be the man that I want to be. I cannot be the man my family deserves if I'm continually using these things. I just can't, they can't be a part of my life. And you have to kind of figure that out. But what about situations where someone has been a bit of a pain in the ass before the relationship and even in recovery? Like what we say sometimes is that it's not always the substance that's causing a lot of these issues. This is ingrained
Sometimes they're
in
just
people.
a jerk.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes people
it's a thing, right?
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people have, pre-established ideas about gender roles or
Controlling.
control, abusive behaviors. Maybe this is what they grew up with. Regardless of the reason, these things just don't disappear because the substance is gone.
Right.
Do you run into that a lot?
I do run into that a lot, actually. And the way I see it is it's what happens after someone gets clean and sober. And then the family's like, well, he's still doing this, he's still doing that. It's just regular stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then I usually say, because this lawyer behind the scene, when the family comes through, I'm like, what do you want from me? He's sober. Come on now. You want me to tell him to fold the socks too? And then we laugh, like behind the scenes. But it's like, all right, you got that. Now I want this and this and this. And then that's just, some of that's just regular family stuff, right? That we have to work through. Everything is not related to the substance. And for the families to know, it's really good to understand that too, right? Because when you're in early recovery, anything you do is a relapse warning sign. Anything you do is because you're acting like an addict. I'm like, no, they're just late.
Everything's tied
They're just
back
a
to
late
that.
person.
He's late because he wakes up late because he doesn't set his alarm. He has a bad habit about doing that. You're right. Addiction.
Not everything is an addict behavior.
No.
Right.
If addiction does anything at all, it just exacerbates and exaggerates those behaviors that are kind of there, right? Some of them are no doubt caused. Like since I've gotten sober, I have not once torn my dashboard apart looking for a pill. Or, like people that, they have like meth-induced psychosis for days on end. Like, yeah, that stuff stops. Don't get me wrong. But the other stuff, the way they treated you before is probably going to be the way they treat you after until they learn how to treat you better. And that's got to be something they want to do. And it kind of draws to the next question I had about your channel is called Put the Shovel Down. And I love that. I've always said, like, you hit rock bottom when you stop digging. And I'm an example of a high bottom alcoholic or addict. Like, I never got caught. I never had a DWI or DUI. I didn't lose my wife. I didn't lose my job. We still had some money in the bank, not a whole lot, but just barely enough, to get by. But you don't have to run this thing all the way down to the ground to get sober. So how do you get people to see that before they're technically ready? Like technically, if you look at my story over the course of all the stories that are out there, I had 20 years left in me, So how do you get people to come to terms with that?
I love that. What we see in our practice is what I say is mostly like functional addicts and alcoholics. A lot of the people I see are highly successful. They're doctors, lawyers, business owners, run marathons. I mean, they're like really functioning better than me in their regular life. I'm like, man, you got your stuff together. Right? They're like disciplined about everything else. They got their clothes ironed. They're like good. But they still have an addiction. A real addiction nonetheless, right? And the thing of it is most people have addictions, they do have an ambivalence inside, whether they admit it or not.
Right.
There's always this part that is fighting about it. And they know. They have their own reasons that they're not saying. Like, I hate the way it makes me feel physically. I hate that I'm gaining weight. I hate that I keep letting my wife down. I hate that I'm half-assing everything at work. They actually have that inside. And all you have to do is create enough safe environment for that to surface itself, right? And not have to keep digging and digging and digging and digging. Those little things, what really does it is, I don't like who this is making me be. That's it. In the end, that's the thing. Right. And that's been there for a long time. And so if we can get people to see it, and I think safety helps people see it faster, then they'll be ready. They'll be done.
Yeah, and safety as opposed to like, I mean, I don't know if you take it back all the way. I guess like tough love was probably the first approach to this for families, right?
Right.
Why is tough love often ineffective?
I'll explain it like this. My son, who's 13, we were talking about this last night in the car. I don't know why he got interested. He started asking me questions. He never asked me questions about what I do. I was like, oh, it's not. And I said, it's like this. If you come home from school and you had a really bad grade on your math test, right? I could handle it by saying to you, I could say, I told you not to study. You stayed up all night, playing video games or on the phone, and you're just waiting until the last second to even study, and then you study for 10 minutes, and then you say you've studied and you have studied. Like, I can go on the whole tirade, which is probably true. Probably true.
Sure.
Right. Or I can say, oh, man, that sucks because I know you needed this certain grade to be able to get this certain privilege at school. Or, oh, man, that sucks because now you're going to have to go take that retest, or you have to sit for those extra hours of tutoring. If I just express empathy, their brain immediately starts to think, I wish I would have got off the game sooner and studied. I should have done that. They actually start to learn. Empathy creates learning. It actually activates the learning part of the brain. Right? If I'm yelling at you, you not only do you don't learn the lesson about you should have studied, but you're so mad at me, you just start opposing me just because you're mad at me, just to get at me. Now I'm just doing it on purpose. I'm just failing my grades to make you mad. It works the same way with any behavior. It's not just addiction, right? It's about how do I come at someone to get them to see the issue faster? Because it's there. Your kid's already disappointed that they made a bad grade. Right? If you let their own disappointment surface, they'll see it faster. That's a higher bottom.
Right.
Yes.
Or like, let's say tough love in the case of like spouse partners. Like if you come home again, or if you come home drunk again, you're not staying here anymore. Like kick them out of the house or whatever, and say nothing else. Like berate them, kick them out of the house, and just be done with it. You can do that. It's just in most cases, I would say it's probably ineffective if you're actually wanting this person to get sober. If you're wanting to just get away from that person, that's wildly effective, right? If you're just wanting to get space from that person.
That's the thing to do.
Right, yeah.
If that's what you really want.
If that's what you want, then that's the best way to get it.
That's what you really want, but you really want them to learn their lesson and know that you mean it this time.
Yeah. And so let's talk boundaries for a minute. What do most people get wrong about boundaries? What do you see anyway? Where do most people screw this up?
Most people think boundaries are rules that they set for other people, and boundaries are rules that you set for yourself. And the easiest way to remember is I say it's okay to build a fence around your backyard. It's not okay to build a fence around your neighbor's backyard. That's just the way that it works, right? So you promise yourself, I will do certain things or not do certain things versus what they can and can't do, right? It's keeping it in your lane about what you're going to do. Like, for example, you can say, don't call me drunk again. Right? You can say that. That's
you can say it, sure.
That you're giving for someone else. Or you can say, hey, if you call me and you're intoxicated, I'm probably not going to take the call. Or I'm probably just going to get off the phone and say, we'll talk tomorrow. That's a boundary for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And boundaries can provide, I guess, what I would call natural consequences for someone. As a result of violating a boundary that I've got for myself, for me to keep me safe, you could lose access to me, or like in your son's case, he could lose access to his PS5 or his phone or anything else. It's like you knew that I had a boundary around grades and the video games or whatever else, right? So it's like I'm not punishing you. It's just that's
actually I would say I think the grades example is interesting. If he gets a bad grade and I take away his phone or my son doesn't play video games much. He just doesn't like them, but most do. So if I took that away, that is actually a punishment. That's not a natural consequence.
Okay.
And that's where people get the boundaries thing wrong. And because we use that with kids, we say that's your consequence. And so that reinforces in our own mind that's a consequence. It's really not. The bad grade is the consequence. Mm-hmm. And whatever the school does about it. And maybe you can't play on your sports team. Whatever that happens naturally in life that you don't dole out, that is a natural consequence. What you dole out most of the time is a punishment, and punishment doesn't make people learn. Punishment makes people build resentment. Natural consequences will make people learn. So when at all possible, let the world be the bad guy and you be the good guy. Whenever possible, let the world be the bad guy. What families want to do, they want to do the opposite of that. They want to fix everything. They want to call up the teacher and say, can he retake it? They want to call the boss. They want to like get you a second chance. They want to fix it. They want to pay for the lawyer. They want to fix all the external, but then yell and scream at you at home, tell you what a piece of trash you are. And I'm like, no, I need you to reverse that. I need you to, you be the good guy, and then you just let all them balls fall where they're going to fall.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes you can have a boundary around something. You're right. And it's like, you're right. That is a punishment. But in that case, like it can affect the spouse too. Like, right. Like, you can have a boundary around, like, say this video game example. It's like, yeah, the actual consequence, I mean, the actual natural consequence is him failing the class. But then as a parent or a spouse, now it's like, well, now I have to deal with that. And then it snowballs from there. Right. So boundaries, I think they can be effective, right, at empowering you, but they don't necessarily solve any problems. I think like when people approach us with them, they're like, I got to set some boundaries. It's like, you can make all the rules you want, but those aren't really boundaries. Like boundaries usually require you to go out of your way to protect yourself. Like it's not going to necessarily change anyone's behavior per se. It could,
exactly,
but it's.
And when you do set a boundary, don't set it thinking they're going to know I mean business. You need to set the boundary knowing 100% you will have to follow through. Not maybe I won't, because most time people set it and they're like, they're not possibly going to do that, right? You need to be 100% ready to do it, prepared to do it, because you're going to have to do it because it's for you. They are not going, just because you said don't do this, I promise you they're going to do it.
Yep.
I don't care how lax you make the rules. I don't care if you say, we're cool as long as you come home once a week and just tell me you're alive. They won't come home once a week. Like, I promise. It doesn't matter how far you back it down. They won't do it. So be prepared to back it up. And then the other thing about boundary is, can you back it up? Is there something for you to do? If there's not, then it's not a boundary because it's not about you. It's a rule.
Yeah, it's a rule. And like you can set whatever rules you want. Just don't expect everyone to follow them. That's the tough part. And when they don't, it just breaks your heart, you know? It's usually not an unfair ask most of the time, I would say.
Well, it reminds me of people who say that, you know, I'm going to set the boundary that if you drink or use or whatnot, I'm going to leave, or you have to leave the house. And they're like, well, why do I have to leave? You know, why the spouse will say, why do I have to leave? They need to leave. And I'm like, well, for me personally, in my life experience, I would do whatever it takes to be safe. If that means that I have to leave the situation, that's protecting myself. I know I can't force my partner to leave. I have to be prepared to leave myself. And is that fair? No. But it is what it is. It's something that I have to do to protect me and my children if that happens.
And one way you can say something like that, which is a really common kind of situation, is instead of saying, if you have one relapse, if you come home drunk, if I find drugs in this house one more time, you know, then you have to leave. What I encourage people to do is something more along the lines like, if the chaos of your addiction starts to harm everybody else in the house, then I'm going to have to do something different. And you need to leave it that vague, not the one time, because let's say they've been sober for 8 months and then they had one slip and they came home drunk one night. And now you done set your boundary.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And you either look like you didn't mean it and makes you feel dumb, or you feel like a jerk because you're like, but they've been doing so good. What you end up doing is backing yourself into a corner.
Right.
So instead of saying something like, if this one thing happens, then you have to do this and that. Like sometimes people say, if you relapse, you have to go back to treatment. I'm like, well, first of all, treatment center's not going to let them back in for one day of relapse. They're just not. They don't meet criteria. So good try. I had that happen yesterday. I was dealing with that. Like somebody tried to make their person go to treatment, and they're like, well, you don't meet the criteria to be here. Well, they wouldn't let them in. I'm like, yeah. But it's more like, goes back to the behaviors. If you're intoxicated and the kids are scared, I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to keep the kids safe. I'm going to put them in a different situation. And if I feel like it's going to happen regularly, then I'm just going to have to create a totally different situation, right? And I say leave yourself room for a game time decision, because these things are very nuanced and you never know what's going to get thrown at you. And when you set too many boundaries, you only back yourself into a corner.
Yep.
A drug addict breaks every rule, every law, every human moral standing. And sometimes families do, especially in early recovery, sign this contract. I'm like, if you think that writing their name on a piece of paper is going to make them any more likely to follow your rule, you have lost your mind.
Right.
But you will feel obligated to do it. So how that works is if you say something like, if you fail one drug screen, X, Y, Z. You got to go to treatment. You got to go to meetings. You got to leave the house, whatever. You back yourself into a corner, because what will happen is you'll know good and darn well that they're using, but they're passing drug screens. Because, hey, we know that there's ways to do that too, right? And you're like, I don't care what that drug screen says. And then they'll hold the contract over your head. They'll say, oh, but you said it's on the contract. And then you will hold yourself to the contract. But I promise you they won't. So
Right. Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Yep. Exactly.
I think addiction education can go a long way in helping family members understand. Something that I've seen just in doing this for a few years is that a lot of family members want to understand, and then once they understand, they want to keep understanding, and then once they understand that, they want to keep understanding more and more and more. And I think it can be a useful tool. I'm sure you do a great job at educating families on what addiction is, how it feels, how it's not personal. They're not doing it to you, they're just doing it. When does it become a trap of inaction, though, one way or the other?
Just as far as learning about it.
Right. So like, for instance, someone could approach us and, hey, what's a good book to read? I don't know, check out Tversky. He's Addictive Thinking, great book. Check that one out. You can read all about how the brain works, about how it's not personal, about how their thinking works and everything else. And people can spend years, and you can spend the rest of your life reading about addiction and studies on addiction, developing empathy. But at some point, I think you have to acknowledge, is like, I've been in this situation now for a decade. And in doing that, I have suffered, financial abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, maybe physical abuse. Have you ever had to have a straight conversation with someone who's been like a chronic relapse over the course of decades and been like, listen, more understanding isn't going to fix this?
Right. And people that tend to do that tends to be their coping strategy just generally in life, right? Like some people they study something, they read everything about it, but they never take an action on it. And you'll see that kind of across the board. Some people are just more deliberators, and they have a hard time making a final decision or something like that. Honestly, that usually comes from like our family counselors. They're the ones that say, this is it. We're on the line. This is it. And because their job is to sort of have the family's back. I always say it's my job to lawyer for my person. So I'm like, don't ask me, because I can't like throw my own client in the bus and tell you to throw them out. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to tell you, give them a chance, go talk to them, because they'll tell you what to do it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're typically the advocate for the addict. Have you ever had, like, what are some of the straight, like, look at me conversations you've had to have with a substance user? You ever had to have those? Like, do you ever just get straight with some people?
I do. And especially when I know from talking to the family counselors, this is for real, the last straw, like this, they're done. Like, because sometimes behind the scenes, they're like, Amber, like, I'm serious. And then what ends up happening sometimes is then I feel the pressure to push too hard. And honestly, it's usually a mistake. If I am going to push someone like that, I won't do it in a harsh tone. I'll be like, dude, word on the street is, this is it. I'm like, I mean, you got like 9 lives, and you done spent 8.5 of them. Mm-hmm. I don't even know that I can save you from this. And I'll say it kind of funny. Yeah. And I'll push someone like that. Right. But if I try to get like, look, you're ruining your life, you're putting your wife in this position, it doesn't work. No. It doesn't work. And actually, it takes us backwards every time. And I have done it. I wish it worked. It's what I want to do. Right. It almost always backfires on me. Yep. So I do it, but I usually do it kind of funny.
Question about like spouse's role in general. I think like when I got sober, we had like a family weekend, like family education program. I got sober through the Karen treatment centers out in PA. Mm-hmm. They used to have one here in Texas, but they had a really good family education program. And I think at the time, the basis of it was essentially just codependency, right?
Yeah, and mainly like worrying about you and your triggers and the things that you were dealing with and things like it wasn't just codependency. It was like your stuff too. Okay,
but I know, speaking with spouses on the other side of it now, that they often feel a lot of blame that comes from the treatment communities, like traditional 12-step communities. Whenever their loved one's in treatment, they're often told, like, you're just as big of a problem in this relationship as anybody else. Like, you're an enabler, you're codependent, you have too many needs. Do you think that's fair?
No, I don't think that's fair, and I think it's insulting, and I think it's a bad way to motivate someone to work on their family recovery. Just like I wouldn't tell you to say that to the addict. It just doesn't work. I don't care who you are, what age you are. If you're 13-year-old with bad grade, it doesn't matter. It doesn't work, right? Yeah. And so instead of saying you're just as big of a problem, I say, hey, you have more influence than you know.
Yeah, right.
It's empowering.
That's
that
what
way.
they want to hear. They want to have influence. And when you're saying you have influence, that means you have influence to push things in both directions. Let's learn how to use our influence, right? And it does feel insulting. I think sometimes it feels insulting when all you get told is you just need to go to Al-Anon. You just need to go to Al-Anon. You just need to go to Al-Anon.
That's all
Same
anyone
thing
ever
as you tell
says.
You just need to go to AA. You just need to, it's insulting,
It is.
especially when you're the family member. And then you're even, what do you mean? I'm not the one with the problem. How am I supposed to go to AA? I'm working 2 jobs. I'm paying all the bills. I'm taking care of the kids. I'm doing all the house stuff. And now you want, it's like they're mad.
Yeah.
When you do that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't like to say it that way, and I don't think it's fair, and I don't really even think it's accurate.
I don't either. Yeah, that's what everyone says. Like, you can look at comment sections online of even some of your videos. It's like those are just people in there. It's like, just go to Al-Anon, go to Al-Anon. It's like, I mean, it works for some people. Don't get me wrong. And everyone, like, there are millions of ways to recover. Like, everyone's got their own different path. What are some of the ones that you recommend people take?
I like them all. I like everyone. I like to say I'm non-denominational recovery. I like it all. Let's try it all on, like a pair of jeans, and see what fits right. We're going to need like Tour de Recovery, and I'll send them out. All right, I want you to go out and try 2 of these and 2 of those, and come back and tell me what you liked about it and what you didn't like. And actually, when you set it up like that, people actually go in a lot more open-minded than when you tell them that they have to do X amount of this or that or whatever to stay in treatment, to stay in whatever, when you give them a rule. I say, and I'll tell them up front, I'll say, listen, everything's different. Here's what I like about this. Here's what I don't like about this. And then if you give them permission to not like certain things about all the different paths of recovery, they really go into it a lot more open-minded than if they feel like they're being forced.
Yeah, it's like children. Children don't like to be told what to do. None of us like to be told what to do.
Nobody likes to be told what to do.
No. So just,
No.
it's the influence piece. I love that. It can work in all different relationships. It's beautiful.
I'm not going to hold you to this. Obviously, we don't have paperwork in front of you, but what do you see as some of the most successful paths that people stick with?
I mean, I like old school 12-step, right? Maybe because there's more of it and it's been around longer, but I know more personal people in my life that have got sober through 12 steps than anything else. A lot of my clients just get sober from counseling or treatment. Some of them get sober from going to church. I have some clients on medication assisted treatment that actually works super well for them and they're doing great. Like, I don't know that I could say this path is better than that path.
Yeah.
I like to say anything, what I count as a recovery activity is anything that you're doing that's helping you grow as a person and makes you want to be a better person. If it's listening to Till the Wheels Fall Off, I'm going to count that as a meeting today, right?
Yeah.
If it's going to church, if it's going to the gym, if it's whatever it is, if it's being in a leadership group, if it's in a small community group where you're volunteering, anything that's like making you be a better person counts. Right? Because it's going to because actually there's science on it, because it builds your serotonin, which is your feel proud of yourself chemical, which actually kind of is a little bit of a vaccination against addiction. So there's reasons why I say that other than just anything goes, because it's not anything goes, but my clients just do it in every single different way. And what's funny is a lot of them really resist 12 steps and a lot of them end up in 12 steps in the end.
It's weird how it works.
Yep.
on their own.
Right. It's not forced.
They just kind of get there and they're, you know what, I actually kind of like that. But sometimes it takes a while.
Children in the mix. I know you've talked a bit about your background, like on some of your videos and whatnot. I came from a home with addiction, and I think it's so much easier to recognize it in your own life than in my past than it was for me to see it in my own home when I was the person with the substance use problem. In what ways is this affecting children long term? Being in a home with an addict and having someone with a substance use disorder and the dysfunction that goes with it and all the focus on the addict. Everyone just, let's fix the addict, fix the addict, fix
Active
the
addiction.
addict.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then like with children, like what kind of effects can this have on someone? And the reason I asked this question sort of leading is I was listening to one of your episodes just the other day, and like this is one of the things that you really need to consider if you are going to stay or go, right? If your children are at risk in some way, if they're being neglected, if they're in harm's way via abuse and of any kind, like this is something to take seriously. A lot of times we can get so caught up in our love lives and what we need that we ended up neglecting some of the most precious things in our lives, like, i.e. our children.
Yeah. I would say in what way is it not affecting them? Because sometimes people, because I usually see the addicted person and they may feel like their children don't even know. And maybe they're 2 years old and they don't know, but it's affecting them.
Yep.
It's affecting them that mom and dad are constantly at each other's throat. It's affecting them that mom is constantly crying. It's affecting them that there's so much chaos going on that all the adults are focused elsewhere. It's affecting them that they feel like mom is being mean to dad all the time because she's mad at him and I don't even know why. Like, there's no, like, they don't know it. It is affecting them because it's causing chaos in the family system, even if it's in the marriage, which affects children always. And so they don't know it. It's not affecting them. That's not a thing.
Right.
Yeah. And it's, at some point it becomes, we've been doing it long enough to know, at some point it becomes like this, almost like a cost benefit analysis, like pros and cons, right? Like when to stay, when to go. You've had some great videos about it. Give me kind of like a high level overview of where you stand with this. Like how do you know when it's time to pack it up? How do you know when it's time to double down? Like, let's work on this stuff together.
When it's physically not safe, like let's say if you have an alcoholic in your life and they get super angry and rageful when they drink, I don't care how much they apologize and say, I won't do that again. I don't care. They mean it. Okay. But it's going to happen again. And so when you're in an unsafe situation, that's clear, right? When you have got to the point where you are so crazy, it has made you lose your mind because it will make you, it will make you lose your mind. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And you're so crazy that you don't even recognize yourself anymore, and you're trying and you can't control it. And now you're just like constantly obsessed, constantly snooping, constantly angry. You're just not even yourself, and you can't get yourself back. That's another time when I think it's time to go, right? Like, most of that is based on where you are. And if there's kids in the mix, where the kids are at. That's the decision. Don't make the decision it's time to go because I think that's what they need. That doesn't help that person get sober. In fact, it almost always makes them worse. Not that that's your fault, but once you're gone, you're the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper's gone. It's on now. Like, it's going to get worse, not better. So you make the decision to leave and go for you, based on what's going on with you and for your children, not because they deserve it or don't deserve it or whatever, because it's not you decided to stay or go for what it's going to do to them. That's a bad reason to make that choice.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it too. I really think so.
Absolutely.
It's like straight to the point as well. I mean, it's like when you have lost yourself and you're in danger, or if you're in danger, it's probably time to pack it up. So from the other side of things, when someone's trying, like I've always said it, and I forget how I put it, but gently, it's like, support people. Like, you can only support someone to the extent that they're working at something, right? Like, you can support them to the degree that they're putting in some sort of effort, and you do have a part in that. But when someone's not showing any effort at all, and this is like a one-sided relationship, and that's like, and believe me, as beautiful as I think that the method is, and I think you're right, it's like, it may not be fair, but it does work. Something that I keep going back to, just as an advocate for spouses, is that it's very one-sided. It's like the spouse is asked to support. You have to change the way that you talk, right? We're not asking the addict necessarily yet, where you have to change the way that you talk. You have to change the way that you see things. You have to play Dale Carnegie every day. You have to do all these things to get the situation where it needs to be. And like, I just wonder, it's like, are we sacrificing a spouse's life and their experience in life? You only get one of these things. Are we sacrificing them for a possibility that someone could get sober? Like, our thing has always been like, we plan to save at least one life. If we can save, we'd love to save two. Like, that's ideal, right? But if we could just save one life. This is a really roundabout way of question of asking you, if you could change one thing about all of this to make this more, I guess, equitable for spouses, what would you change? Like, if you could just tell your clients, like, you need to acknowledge this crap like as fast as possible. If you could do that, like, would you do it? What's something that, in a perfect world, how would this work?
That's a big question. My first thought goes back to something you were saying early in that, Matt, which is when you're doing all this work and you're not seeing any progress on their end, and they're not seeing, they're not working, they're not trying, you're doing all the trying, right? The first thought I have is that a lot of times family members don't recognize trying when they see it. So first of all, I want to redefine trying, right? Okay. Because family members, if you're not 100% sober now and always, then you're not trying. When actually there's a lot of what I call bargaining trying that happens before long-term sobriety. And once you can recognize that, maybe it's not perfect, but they are still trying. When they're still doing let me drink less, I know that's not going to work. I'm not telling you that's going to work. It's not going to work. But they're trying and they're figuring it out, right? Or, okay, yeah, they had 6 months sober, but they relapsed. Okay, if they got 6 months sober, that's a lot of trying. So first of all, I would say, how do we recognize trying? Because it looks different than what you think.
Yeah,
when they're
we covered the
really
stages
not
of
trying,
change
you
model.
kind of know it because it's like they're trying to make you leave.
Oh yeah.
And they're really, really not trying. They're pushing you to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Trying, and it's like, well, we covered the stages of change model. The triangle. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but that's kind of what you're seeing whenever you're going through this sort of back and forth, this bargaining with themselves. Because you're right, it is a process for someone to understand they have an issue. It's not that quick. It's just usually not. So that's trying for you.
Yeah. Right. And when you can recognize trying, it actually makes you feel better. Like, for example, sometimes people will say to me, like, he's been to treatment 3 times and, he never stays sober past 4 months. I'm like, dude, if someone gets out of treatment and stays sober for 4 months, that's a big trying, right? I'm not saying it's perfect. We got some lessons to learn, but there was try there. If someone gets out of treatment and they relapse on the first day, they didn't try. Okay, let's but sometimes trying looks different than you think. It's a learning process, right? When someone's not trying, they're almost purposely trying to provoke you. They're constantly, like, literally doing it more and more and more to go against you. It's pretty clear.
Yeah, so I guess as a spouse, you have to ask yourself, like, do I have patience for this anymore? That's kind of what it boils down to, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I always say, I'm not telling you I would stay. I would leave long before these other people would leave. I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. Like, y'all got way more patience than I do.
I'm like, I would have left. Like, I'm not telling you I would stay. Like, I have a sister who's addicted, and I gave her an older half sister, and I was still giving her money all the time when she called, well into being an addiction counselor, like 10 years into being I was still giving her money. And for me, the last straw was my mother had already died of addiction, and my grandmother passed away. And my sister would frequently go to my grandmother, who didn't have anything, who literally just lived on, like Social Security or whatever. Yeah. And my grandmother had put enough money in her checking account, and she would say, now, if I die, I've got enough money in there to pay for the funeral or whatever. Well, and I don't live in the town where my family's from. So my sister and my grandmother, they lived in this town in Tennessee. And when my grandmother passed away, the day she passed away, my sister had went and told my grandmother, like, I need new tires or whatever. Can you give me a check? And then my grandmother passed away literally that day because she'd had like a hip surgery. It's a complicated thing. And then my sister took all the money out of that account. And for me, that was the last straw. Yeah. That's why I say, when you know.
Yeah.
And it didn't upset me, and I didn't struggle over it, and that was it. And I'm just done. Like, and I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel mixed about it. That's what I say. When you know. If you're still asking me, you're not there yet. If you're asking me, do I give you permission? Permission granted.
Yeah.
Right. But when you know.
Yeah, and we do the same thing. Like, we encourage people, like, turn over every stone, because if you don't, you're always going to wonder, and you'll probably always be stuck in it. Like, but you're right. Like, when you're done with something, you're done. It felt the same way with me in addiction. Like, I was done. Like,
there's a clarity.
Right. The day I checked into treatment, like, if I had anything going for me, it's like I already completed step 1. Like, I was done. Like, I knew that I was done, and I couldn't do it anymore, and I was totally cool with it, fine with it. Just show me how to live at this point, and I'll be good.
Because you had tried all the other ways.
Tried everything.
Right. Same thing for the spouses. And that's what I say, the bargaining, right? You got to let people try all the ways.
And just kind of love them in the meantime, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Curious what you think about, it's harm reduction, but what do you think about people with substance abuse issues and then tapering to, like, maybe a not as severe substance? Like, let's say that's like they're California sober or something like that. Do you have a lot of clients that kind of work through that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of the things we all try.
Yeah.
Let me just drink beer, not liquor. Let me just smoke weed, not do cocaine. I mean, all the things. Everyone tries it. It rarely ever works. Yeah. But I think you kind of have to let people try it. And you can actually help people figure it out faster by, when a client tells me that, which they will tell me, they all tell me, then I say, well, for a lot of people that doesn't work out, but let's try it, because I don't know you. Everyone's different, right? Let's do it. And then I'll say, how will you know it's not working for you? And I have them say to me, well, if this or this or this is happening, then I'll know this isn't working. And I don't care what they say. It has to be what is in their head, not what's in my head. So I might say to them, like, well, how will you know your drinking's too far? Maybe they quit cocaine, but they still want to drink, right? How will I know your drink's too far? I don't care if they tell me a gallon of vodka a day. Cool, let's go with that. Because if it's alcoholism, it'll pass that limit. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what they don't worry about what they say. Don't matter. Like I had a client who told me a week or two ago, I just want to smoke 4 to 6 times a day. Marijuana. Like, this was his recovery plan. Like
Just staying
like,
stoned
right.
all day long.
Just so I mean, most people would say just once a day or on the weekend.
Right, right.
I'm like, all right, let's do it. Listen, by the end of the first week, he's like, yeah, I did it like for like a couple of those days, but yeah, I passed the limit. Like, and then he figured that out within 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are ways to help people figure that out faster. But yes, everyone tries it. I have occasionally, and I don't even like to say it because it's so
Yeah,
rare,
it's
right?
almost like you don't want to
seen
promote
someone
it because
alcoholic
it's
quit
the
drinking who
anomaly.
can occasionally smoke marijuana every now and then, or someone who quits an opioid addiction that 5 or 10 years later can have a drink every now and then. But it's rare. And what I would say is, what usually doesn't work is to immediately give up one and either still use the other or start using the other, because you don't develop skills to live life that way. You just change dependencies. What can work sometimes is after a long period of sobriety, you've straightened your life out. But I always say it's risky. Like, I don't encourage people to try it, to be honest. Like,
He's had that thought a lot.
Yeah. Like it's so risky. It's like you have to look at the facts on paper. It's like my life has gotten so great. And it's because I'm not taking anything. It's like, why do you mess with it? Right.
Why take that risk?
It's like, don't risk it. Just don't. It's for me anyway. It's just, I know it's not an option. I just don't even mess
Right.
with it. I've got enough of my past behavior to prove what I normally do. Why would it be different? Right.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's such a slippery slope. And you're right. Like I know someone personally who's been able to do this successfully, but I never mention it because then everyone thinks they're an exception.
Right. And if you think about it, I've been counseling people with addictions for 22 years or something like that now, like a long time. Okay. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I can only think of maybe like 4 or 5 off the top of my head. Okay.
It's so rare.
That should tell you something.
Right. Yeah.
So rare. Yeah. It's
And
incredible.
I still worry about them people. I'm like, I don't know. That might not.
Right.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
they're probably not even telling me the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you have to wonder.
You have to
really,
wonder.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long is the process of intake to your facility to when, how do you know when someone is or that you're done with a family? How do you know what that looks like?
I sort of let them decide. I don't encourage people to stay longer than what they need. Usually they'll get to a point where I'll usually say something like, I think you're pretty good. Do you want me to put you on an as-needed basis? So I don't really close the door and say you're out. I say, I'll put you on an as-needed basis. Most of the time they're like, no, I think I need to come for a few more times. Most of the time that's what they say. But I just like to put people on an as-needed basis, and then they can come back in if they need to. They can come and go, because I'm not like a treatment center anymore in that traditional sense. So I don't have to close a chart or anything, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess in my head, I'm imagining this takes in my head, I'm thinking this is a year-long process, or it could be years long. Like how long is a family generally seeing you to work through this? Like if they did it the right way, if they came to every appointment and they were actually
Doing the work.
like how long, does it generally take the average family to see the problem, learn new behaviors, and then work a recovery program?
It depends on what stage of change they're in when they come in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That is,
Right. So a lot of people I deal with are what they call the pre-contemplators, right? They're still in denial. And I can work with your person that's still in denial, but it's going to be 6 months of me working with your person in denial till we get to the active stage of change, right? And then we're going to start working on it, right? But sometimes, and these days a lot more, because people find me on YouTube and they bring themselves to me and they're already in the active stage of change, then it doesn't necessarily take that long. It can take a month or two, you know? So it's a lot more based on what stage of change that they're in when they come, and how much the family gets it.
Right.
If that family does what they need to do, it's going to go faster.
Yeah. And families being supportive, empathetic is certainly helpful, but you're also not a stranger to telling people listen, have boundaries. And if there's something you can't tolerate, you don't have to tolerate it. If this is what you want to do, I will show you how to do it, but you don't have to. Right.
But don't kill yourself doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
I always say, if I was a carpenter, I could teach you how to build a $5 million house, but that's not me saying you should do it.
Right.
In fact, I might tell you, like, I don't recommend you do it, but if you want to, here's the blueprint. You know?
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and I think you also know as a professional that they have to do that because that's just one more stone to turn over before they can really make a decision from a place of clarity, like confidence, like knowing I left it all out on the table. Like I put everything out there. I did everything I could.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, listen, I'm not saying that if you do this, it will work 100%. I'm telling you, you'll have a lot better chances if you do. But if it doesn't work, you're going to leave with a solid heart. You're not going to look back and regret. You're not going to question yourself. You're not going to be mad at yourself because you acted like a total jerk and think to yourself, it shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like you're going to, if it doesn't work, you're going to leave solid. Like you're not, you can feel completely fine about it.
Curious what you think about some of the anecdotal, I guess you could call it evidence that's coming out on like drugs like the GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and things like that, and some of the effects they're actually having on impulsive behaviors like addiction.
I think it's awesome. I told you I like it all. Like, listen, if there's something we're going to do that's going to make you successful, because sometimes people will say, well, like that's cheating. Like sometimes people will say, even like if someone takes Antabuse, which makes them sick if they drink, they'll say, well, that's cheating. I'm like, no, it's not. That's realizing I have a problem so severe, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Like, it's not cheating. It's actually the opposite of that. Like, I'm a fan of, now I wouldn't say go take a benzo or something that's going to be addictive, but I'm like, yeah, let's try it.
Yeah, there are options available. I'm very much the same way.
As a tool,
Yeah, they're tools. Like you can look at the Sinclair method. Like science is great. Like if you actually follow it, you're going to have success most likely. You know, if you're taking the drug, if you're taking naltrexone and you're going to therapy and you're changing your behaviors, like you will rewire your brain. It's an amazing thing. Likewise, AA, like it'll work if you do it. If you're committed to it, it's whatever you want to commit to.
What research shows as far as like what counseling techniques work and what doesn't work, it's whatever the person truly believes will work.
That's exactly it.
That's the answer. Does this person think you can help them? Do you think you can help them, and do they believe that you can help them? And do you have a way of explaining it to them in a way they understand? That's the formula, right? It's like, it's the belief, because when you believe it, then you figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. You will find a way once you believe it. So it's just a matter of that. Like, let's just listen. There's a buffet. You pick whatever you want. We're going to try them all, and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
How many families would you say that you've helped into recovery over your career?
I mean, thousands. I mean, especially when you think I worked in the treatment center for all those years.
Oh, that's right.
Just tons and tons and tons and tons. And that's what I tell people. I hate it when people give all those like really bad statistics, like only 1 in 10. I'm like, okay, 1 in 10 people maybe get it and never have a relapse. But so how are they taking these statistics, right? Like most of the people that we see get it. It may take them a while, but they get it. Like I just hate it when people say they give all these like negative numbers and make you feel terrible. I'm like, that's not helping anything. It's not true. I see people get sober every day, all the time.
Yeah, they do. Like in my experience, it's a pretty low number. Like I would say, of the people that actually work through it, 100% of them. They live a happy, sober life. But I think that 95% of them just aren't ready to work it yet. Like, so in my experience, it feels like, right, it feels like 5%.
Maybe they're still bargaining or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. Then there's 95% of them that just are going to keep experimenting, you know? They're going to still try to figure it out on their own. It's like, that's great, man. That's seek happy, whatever works for you. It's just, you know, I think that's where it comes from probably. It's like,
but a lot of those people get it eventually. Like, if you think about how many times you probably tried different things.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't work along the way. And sometimes it's like, did it really not work? Because people say, I've been to treatment, it didn't work. I'm like, okay, but did you do what they told you?
Yeah.
It works if they do what they told you. Yeah. It's the only thing in my life.
It's not like medical treatment where you take a medicine and it fixes you. You go, they tell you what to do. Did you do what they told you? Because if you do what they told you to do, it will work.
Works. Yeah.
Because they told you not to use. So like there's no, it doesn't work for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess the stats are bad if you're looking at it like change now, right? Someone to change right now. If someone walks in your office right now, but what you're saying is if you never give up, technically you're at some point going to.
Oh, if you're alive, you're in the game.
You achieve recovery, right? I think from a spouse's perspective, you just have to decide like how much patience do I have? How much empathy do I have? The capacity for it,
it's
right?
Like, right. How much rope do I have?
Yeah.
And that's a valid question. But like my goal when someone walks into my office, it's not that they never pick up or do anything again. My first and foremost goal is to make sure they have a good experience. Because if it doesn't work and they have a relapse somewhere in the future, they're not going to be hesitant to either come back to see me or go somewhere else to get help. So my biggest goal is to make sure they have a good experience. And as long as they have a good experience, they're actually just a lot more likely to keep coming or get help elsewhere and keep trying until they figure it out.
Just off the top of your head, like what are relapse rates in general for the first year of recovery?
I have no idea. I have no idea. And I don't trust numbers that you see, because what does the number mean? The number means they didn't use it all. The number means they didn't get arrested. The number means these are the people that actually took the survey and the other ones didn't. Like,
it's self-reported.
There's
most of
so
the time
much
too,
flaws with how they get
Right?
those numbers.
I'm not a big fan of the numbers either.
I'm like,
I don't.
sometimes people will they'll like call the treatment center and ask them what their success number is. I'm like, first of all, they don't know. And if they do know, then you need to ask them how those numbers are collected.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you that most people that come to see us, they end up doing pretty good. Not all of them, but like I said, even if they don't do good right away, if they have a good experience, we've given them the tools, they usually figure it out at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You plant a seed, and then you are a midwife to ideas and new behaviors and these amazing possibilities for change that are possible for everyone. I believe it's out there, and everyone can do it. It's not reserved for some and not others. Every single person in the world can do it. Find happiness in their own way. It's just, you're right. Stages of change model. Where are you at on that? It's a huge determining factor.
Right. Sometimes it's just my goal. My whole thing is if someone's in a pre-contemplation, the whole treatment is just trying to get them to realize they have a problem, right? So it's where are we at? What's the next step? That's why it's just so hard to come up with what is the research and the statistics, because most of those come from different treatment centers and stuff, and they have a stake in that.
Oh yeah.
Numbers look however. I'm not saying they're lying. I'm just saying you can collect numbers in certain ways to create certain numbers that you want.
Exactly.
They're not lying, but they're being deceptive. I've seen it's like, we have a 95% success rate. It's like, okay, where'd you get that? Well, it's self-reported over the course of 30 days after treatment, which is pretty much anyone could stay sober for 30 days. And then if someone doesn't answer
only
the
people
phone,
that take the survey are going to.
That's exactly it.
Right.
So if you don't answer the phone, they just throw that data out. And so you have a smaller pool of successful people, and it looks really good on paper. You know?
Yeah.
And insurance companies love that
exactly.
stuff. They love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So if people wanted to join in on what you're doing over there, if they wanted to get services from your facility, if they wanted to find out more about you, how can they do that?
The best place is to just go to YouTube, and I have 1,000 videos or something ridiculous over there. And so a lot of times you can get a lot of help without ever having to pay anything, honestly.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to get my services, if you watch the YouTube, you do all that, you're already 3/4 of the way there.
Nice.
And maybe you just need my help just to get that last little mile or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the best place is just to go right to YouTube. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. And there's tons of help and information there for whether you have the addiction or a loved one that has an addiction. Either side.
That's amazing. I love that too. Like, that's kind of been our thing as well. It's like, give away as much stuff as you possibly can for free. Just give it away, get people to help. If they really need you, they'll come find you.
Right. By the time people come see me these days, they really are 3/4 there. I'm just
That's
literally
easier for
helping
you
them
too.
tweak the last little pieces.
Yeah.
Which is so much more time effective, cost effective, and everything else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So if you're a listener and you want to know more about this, head over to YouTube, and it's Put the Shovel Down, and you can find tons and tons of videos. Quick question about being a YouTube star. Do you ever get recognized in public?
I have a couple of times. Not maybe 3 or 4 times. Not very many.
I figured it'd be more than
and it's
that.
kind of fun then. I really wouldn't want to be recognized all the time. I don't think being a celebrity would be fun. It's only happened to me a couple of times, so that's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
But if it was all the time, I think that would
Be annoying.
that'd be annoying. I wouldn't want to hear. Yeah.
I have to watch over
If I
your
felt like I
shoulder all
couldn't
the time.
go anywhere without, having all my makeup on.
Right.
Right. Couldn't go to the Dollar General down the street or whatever.
Well, you've got an amazing channel with so much information on there. I mean, it's just a breadth of information on there that is helpful for spouses, partners, and if you're someone that's struggling with addiction as well, I think you're someone that absolutely gets it. And we can't thank you enough for coming on the show. You're someone I've wanted to talk to and Paige wanted to talk to for a very long time. So thank you for joining us here with us today. It's been amazing.
One little question, you can edit this in or out, but I think I'm supposed to talk about Soberlink at some point.
Yeah.
You want me to add something in?
No, I want you to talk about, no, we can just do it right now. I want you to talk about it because this was something you used in your practice before.
Yes.
Yeah. So you believed in it before they've approached you.
I think this kind of, when you were talking, Matt, about accountability earlier, I think accountability is probably the number one thing I think that helps in early recovery. The kind of accountability I mean where it's like transparency accountability. It's like a Soberlink or any kind of accountability. But I have found I've been using Soberlink since long before I was on YouTube. So like I'm already a believer. I approached Soberlink. I said, hey, I'm already a giant fan. I'm kind of mad when I found out about Soberlink. I'm like, why didn't I think of that and invent that? Like that, I love it, right? And I have had so many clients have success on Soberlink. So many clients that actually didn't have to go to Big Daddy treatment and were able to get sober at home and keep their job and stay in their family, which I think is so much more effective because you got to learn to be sober in the real world, whether you go to treatment or not, right? This is where the rubber meets the road. And Soberlink has been the thing that's not only helps people to get sober, but helps to build the trust back faster, which makes everything easier, right? And like you were saying earlier at the very beginning, Matt, when you were saying, well, you can get a breathalyzer anywhere, you sure can. But this is a system, right? Before I knew about Soberlink, we would have people whose spouses would breathalyze them like every day when they came home from work. The problem with that is it puts the family member in the policing role, which is no good, especially in a marriage situation, because you're supposed to be the partner, not the probation officer.
Yep.
Right? And what happens is it's very awkward. If that's what's happening every day when you come from work, is I'm asking you to take a test. And it's so awkward that eventually you're just going to stop doing it because it's icky. It feels icky. And then you're going to like just let that ball drop. With Soberlink, it's like, what are those old commercials? Set it and forget it. Or those old commercials. Set it and forget it, right? Like it runs itself. And when Soberlink asks you to take a test, you don't feel like your spouse is accusing you of anything. It's a machine. It is set that way. You came up with the time yourself. It's not an accusation. It's not anything. It's that's why it's not just a breathalyzer. It's a system that runs itself, right? That there's not a lot of like fighting about it. There's not a lot of wondering about it. It like you can't really cheat Soberlink. So like it's there. It runs itself. It handles itself, and it is very, very effective. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. I believe in it. I think it's great. When we first were approached, I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about it because I don't want the spouses to be a police officer. But then they explained to me how it works. I'm like, oh, well, that's wonderful. You guys are taking the heat. They can yell at Soberlink, but the fact of the matter is that you blew dirty. So mad at yourself, but your spouse didn't say, hey, I need you to blow in this real quick or anything like that.
That's why I like it because it takes, and most of the clients I have, the results come to me, not really the spouse. Because and I like it. Sometimes I have to go to the spouse. If coming to me is not working, then I'm going to put your spouse on it because that's going to work. But I'd rather it come to me because if you're 5 minutes late taking a test, for me, I've got several people on this. I'm not freaking out. I probably didn't even see it because I got out of session 2 hours later or whatever. But if you're 5 minutes late taking it and your spouse sees it, they're like panicking or whatever. So I really rather like come to me or a sponsor or someone else that's in recovery that's supporting you because then, and it allows the family to be like, it's being taken care of. I'm like, Amber's got it. Thank you, Amber. And now I don't have to watch for it and do the smell checks and ask you 1,000 times because I know it's being handled. That's the thing is it's being handled. And now it takes that out of the relationship.
Yeah, it's one more thing off their plate. Like spouses have enough to worry about on any given day, right?
Right. And the person who's in recovery doesn't have to deal with those questions all the time. Like I have one client who's on Soberlink. Oh my God, forever. Not because I was making her. And I was be like, don't you want to come off that Soberlink? I mean, years. She's like, no, I don't because I don't have to deal with questions if I'm going to Target, when I'm out too long at the Target. My husband was like, where were you? What are you doing? I don't have to deal with the weird, like, guessing. And it just makes my life a lot easier. I'd rather just take a Soberlink and then we're done. And we don't have to have all that weirdness. And my wife doesn't have to worry when I take a business trip. And it's just handled.
Yeah. It just it takes the question off the table.
Right, and it actually helps both sides. Takes all that uncomfortableness out.
Yeah, it's a great device. They're an amazing company, amazing partners too. Like my big thing with them was like we like with you, I've been very, very good about my language, but I usually don't have good language. I just talk. And I was like, is that okay? They're like, yeah, like we're not trying to censor you, dude. We just want people to know that this thing exists. Like it helps people if you put it out there. I was like, okay, yeah, awesome. I did. This is my first time.
People are watching me because they have an addiction. A curse word is the least of
right.
You can't hear a curse word. You're in the
wrong place.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they've been so great. They've been so great. So thank you for coming on today. Thank you for discussing all this with you. I think there's a ton of information here, and I love to get some of the honest perspectives from you too. Like just simply saying like, yeah, this is what you have to do to be successful. I'm not saying it's fair. You know, I love that. I love the honesty in that.
Yeah,
it's true.
thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a question I had. I was wondering if she's going to be like, no, it is fair. Like, there's no way that's fair. Like, I don't want to have to debate about it. Like,
No, I feel like it's abusive for me to tell people to do it. Like,
Right.
I feel very mixed. I feel wrong about it.
Yeah.
It's not right.
but if someone's
just know it
volunteering saying, I
Right.
want to do this, like if they're coming to you saying, I want to do this more than anything, it's like, I'll show you how then. Okay. All right. Well, then this is what you do. And you can get success. But you're right. You don't have to do it. If you're done with it, you don't. That's okay too. That's okay.
No judgment from me. Like, I'm not judging you, telling you like that you should be doing this. There's no should. It's just
Right.
this is what to do.
Yeah. I love that.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, that does it for this episode. Amber, thank you again. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Paige.
And we'll see ya.
Bye.